Hello, my name is ilikebeingsmart, and this is my AGDQ 2019 submission of Wario's Woods for the Super Nintendo. This is going to be expert mode, and the estimate is going to be 41 minutes. I must admit I am not the best at explaining the basic mechanics of the game, so I'm kind of hoping the couch, if this gets in, will help me with that, but I will do the best I can here to be as clear as possible since this is kind of a complicated game on first look. Interestingly enough, the first part of the run actually isn't the gameplay mechanics at all. It's the fact that I mashed through the intro sequence at the very beginning. You already saw part of the run just by watching Wario's face pop up and disappear again. This has to do with the RNG manipulation later in the run that I'll get to when it's more relevant, but I thought I'd bring it up right now to tease it. The second thing you may or may not have noticed is actually the height difference between the stacks. This is one of the things that makes this category unique from the normal run that happened at AGDQ 2018. The idea behind expert mode, which you can actually activate by holding up on the D-pad and pressing start at the very beginning, is that you start with more monsters than your opponent. This may not seem as obvious right now, but as we get through to the run, particularly in the last 4 stages that we call the castle section, it will be very obvious that they start with not a lot of monsters, and we start with a lot of monsters. And now the basic mechanics of the game. Like many puzzle games, you need to clear 3 in a row. In this case, it needs to be at least 1 bomb and 2 monsters. There are situations where you can clear 3 bombs, or I think later on I clear 3 diamonds in a row. When you do that, they go away. The object, basically, is to clear off all the monsters you see on the screen. There are 4 different ways to do this. First, pick up an individual monster and place it in a different spot. Second, pick up a column of monsters and place it either to your left or right, unless you have more room, and then you can walk with the column. And sometimes if a bomb's falling, it'll knock off part of the monsters, and those will fall behind you. The third way is when you are holding a monster or a column, you can press a button to warp to the top of that column. And the fourth way is to kick either bomb or monster across the screen until it hits a wall or it falls into a pit. One of my favorite patterns in the entire game requires a more advanced technique where you climb up a column, grab monsters, throw them underneath you, and do that 3 or 4 times in a row to create long lines of diagonals. If you clear 4 or more monsters, what ends up happening is the thwomp you see on the right hand side of your screen drops, and the thwomp that you don't see on my side of the screen rises up. This is helpful for 2 reasons. First, it drops the thwomp on your opponent, because the other way you can beat around is to crush your opponent, and that's through clearing 4 or 5 monsters at a time. And also, later on in the run, it helps raise your stack, and that's important because it gets you out of a lot of sticky situations that you'll see later on, where you get a little close to getting crushed yourself. And although that doesn't happen in this run, that is a very real possibility. And even though my PB is around 31 minutes, the estimate is 41 minutes for that very reason, because it gets kind of hard later on. Couple more things I want to get to before we get to how to speedrun this game and make it super interesting. Is there are 2 mechanics. One is called chains, the other is called eggs, I guess, for lack of a better term. Chains are basically when you take 3 or more monsters and clear them consecutively, and then a big column of monsters of the same color appears on the other side of whichever opponent cleared the chain. This is actually the only way that I'm aware of, after a little bit of experimentation, to lower the timer. The timer that I'm referring to is above the stars, and you see the blue and the pink bars gradually moving up. If you chain, that timer goes down. And the reason you want that timer to go down is because you want more bombs to drop and less monsters to drop. Because since the idea is to clear all the monsters off the screen, you don't want the monsters to drop in something I call monster mode, but it can be bat mode, crow mode. I don't really know what little guy is up there that makes all the monsters drop. But that ends up happening after the timer you see above the stars goes all the way to the top. Another thing you can do is drop eggs. And the way you drop eggs on either side is to basically clear 2 rows of 3 or more at the same time. And when you do that, it drops an egg on the other side. You can clear that egg very quickly by picking it up and putting it back down. If you don't clear the egg, a row of same colored monsters drops, and then again, that's more monsters, more problems. There's one thing I have yet to talk about, and that is creating diamonds. The reason I left it until last is it's because it's kind of the core part of the speedrun, and everything else helps, but diamonds are what help the most. So the way you do that is you clear 5 or more bombs and or monsters. That literally creates a diamond on the screen. What the diamond does is it clears all the monsters of that particular color. The unique feature of diamonds is it will only spawn a diamond color of a monster or bomb on your screen. So let's say you started with red monsters, but now they're all gone. You cannot spawn a red diamond. This leads to something we like to call color optimization, which basically means you want to, in addition to trying to get 5 or more in a row and get diamonds to clear your monsters and getting more and more diamonds, you want to try to clear all of one color, including the bombs, as quick as you can. That way you clear colors, you get more diamonds, you get less options for diamonds, etc. Another nuance of speedrunning with the, I guess, diamond strategy, again, for lack of a better term, like I said, I'm not the best at explaining this. The nuance of that is you can clear monsters and bombs horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. The best way, in my opinion, personally, to clear monsters if you're going to try to spawn a diamond is vertically. And the reason for that is because the diamond will spawn on whatever row or column any of the monsters explode. So when you get rid of a column vertically, you know exactly where the diamond is going to fall, and then you can adjust your play from there. If you go horizontally, you have some idea where the diamond is going to fall or spawn, and you can get easy access to it depending on how deep the row is in your set of monsters. But diagonally is very risky, because what can happen is the diamond can spawn buried within all the monsters that you can't get to yet. And when that happens, especially in the later rounds when you have a lot of monsters, it's hard to get to, and you need that extra room in order to buy yourself more time when your stack is 2 rows from the top and the computer stack is 3 rows from the bottom. And you'll see a lot of that later as time goes on and it becomes very obvious. I keep saying it, but you're gonna see why this game gets really hard. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so impressive, too. It's because even if it's not hard, once you've played it over and over and you've seen the same patterns over and over again, it looks really complicated. And for newer players, you kind of look and you just go, what? I know Cards of the Heart is one of the kind of legendary players in our community in regards to panel-to-pawn games. He's run Tetris Attack before, and when he first played this game, he was like, I don't know what's going on. So it's a very complex-looking game for what it is, and that's one of the reasons I absolutely love it, and I think it deserves to be shown in a GDQ again with this particular mode, because it's not like any of the other games. You're moving around, you're picking up the monsters, you're placing them down, you're figuring out how to start the patterns, and on the fly, what to do next. And it just makes it a really unique puzzle game to play, and I have a lot of fun with it. But we are getting to the super fun stuff very shortly. Before I get to the part of the run where I start explaining how the RNG works, I want to give a quick shout out to a game one of my friends showed me called Treasure Stack for the Xbox that is very similar to this game. And basically it's like woods, but you can jump and use a grappling hook, which I think is really neat. Okay, so this is the part where I get to predict bombs, and it's really, really fun. But I want to explain how I get to predict bombs and why I get to predict bombs. First, let me talk about now, at this point, why I mashed through the initial intro sequence. So, each pattern has a set of bombs, and in order the bombs drop. There are a couple of different ways to change the pattern of when the bombs drop. And one of them is going through the intro sequence and watching the demo of the game. So if you go through, you'll see like a demo of Toad playing game. But the thing is, that changes the RNG scene. Another way to do it is round game, which is actually a mode that is played on the NES. That is the original system for this. This is actually just a Super Nintendo version of the NES game. That's a little bit more complicated, and the round game isn't as commonly run, and I just think isn't quite as interesting as this mode is to run in this game. Another way to change the RNG seed is to do something called time race mode, where basically it's kind of the game's version of speedrunning, where you can try to play through rounds as fast as you can. I don't really know why that's not a thing. That would actually be really interesting to try as a speedrun thing, but it hasn't really been done yet. But that's another way you can change the RNG seed within the context of the game. So originally we thought the patterns repeated and the bombs didn't repeat. And then there's someone named Droodbot who was looking into the game because none of us were really tassers. And he found what became in the AGDQ 2018 run as the list. And basically what the list is the order in which the bombs are going to drop every single time. And he set it up into 4 columns of 64 bombs each. And the way the game works is when each new round comes up, so each time you gain another star, essentially, the game will either move 64 bombs forward or 64 bombs backwards. And I'm not really sure why it's forwards or backwards, but I just know that sometimes the seeds repeat themselves, which happens in my run. So sometimes they repeat twice in a row and other times they go forward. So what I'm going to show you, which is on screen right now, is the RNG seed for this particular pattern. Now, like I said, for Lizardon, who you just saw, Sarissa, who you're seeing now, and Mangilox, I just call him Orange Fuzzy Guy, which is why I couldn't think of his name, who you're going to see next. It is a set pool of 16 patterns that can happen. And for my particular game, as of right now, and like I said, I don't know how the seeds change necessarily, the seed has one of 3 different starts within this major list of 256 bombs. So I'm going to wait until the start of the next round here to show you how this actually works in action. So here's the list. I like this pattern a lot because it's a very easy yellow. And I'm going to take the list away when I get rid of all the greens here. And now I have a different way of figuring out the bombs, even though the list is no longer officially intact. So I realized that was a really short example and I've been talking a lot. And so I'm going to let you just watch some of the gameplay here at the end. And then we'll go through one more and then I'll explain some of my other process for how I'm going through this while I'm playing the game. Okay, so here's another list. Sometimes here what I'll do is I'll wait for the cyan bomb to get this chain here. But sometimes what happens is the computer doesn't agree. And I actually missed the, this is a bad example, I missed the, there's something you can do where you can pick up a bomb and you can actually miss that diagonal. So the reason why this list is still up is because there's still bombs up. So now it's gone. Now the list is gone. And now I'm kind of more freeform. So as much as the best laid plans and the best laid patterns can happen, you are playing against a computer. And when that happens, things can happen, wrinkles can happen. Luckily I finish up this pattern super quick after this. I get pretty good luck at the end here. So gray patterns are really unique in this particular seed I've stumbled across. And this is the seed I will be running on if this gets in. Because the gray bombs, for some reason, usually replace either the yellow bombs or the cyan bombs in the system I normally use to think through what bomb is coming next. In this case, it's usually yellow, cyan, cyan, yellow, red. And now it's gray instead of the yellow. And then all the colors are still there, and you'll notice that I've taken the list away from you, which I was doing before in order to indicate that there was a color gone. In this case, I'm looking for a yellow bomb specifically to get 5 in a row to drop the Thwomp to crush Mangilox, which happened there. So this pattern's kind of boring and straightforward, and the next one has stuff I want to talk about. So what I will talk about here is once this list disappears, my other way of figuring out how bombs go. So in the middle where the list just disappeared from, you can see 2 different kinds of monsters. And if you look at the screen, the red, white, and pink are all the same. And then the yellow and blue monsters are the same. And when the bombs drop, if you notice the next time I put the lists up, they actually drop in those groupings. So another way I can tell is if a red bomb drops, I can kind of think a white and pink bomb will come soon, or if a blue bomb drops, I can think a yellow and cyan bomb are going to come soon. So this is just crazy, and this is the kind of stuff that can happen with this game sometimes. Where literally it's nuts. Like, I was literally one frame away. And something I was noticing from watching this back is that when you clear something, like a 3 or diamond or whatever, the bombs actually freeze in place. So, like, they'll stop, so that way you have time to move around. And one of the big things that newer players don't necessarily grasp, at least in the Super Nintendo mode, I can't speak for the NES game, but in the Super Nintendo game, while the bombs and monsters are exploding, you can actually move. And so a lot of the speedrun optimization is about trying to move while things are exploding, while the bombs are frozen, in order to make the most of your situation. Another weird thing I stumbled across while I was recording runs of this and trying to get kind of a run I thought showed off the game that I wanted to play. Kind of a quirky little extra thing I discovered. But if for some reason the thwomp drops and lowers because I'm doing what I'm doing, which is trying to make diamonds, trying to crush the opponent. If for some reason it drops and there are monsters that the thwomp covers and there are no more monsters on the computer's screen, you lose. So then there becomes this entire other nuance of, should I explode the diamonds? Should I not explode the diamonds? Should I even be making diamonds in the first place? It gets so silly and so meta after a while that you get so to a point where you just start playing mind games on yourself to try to figure out what's the quickest way to get through this. And it kind of, obviously this is not chess, but it reminded me a lot of chess in how there's a lot of opening, and maybe this is just me nerding out about the fact that Fabiano Caruana is going to be in the World Chess Championship against Magnus Carlsen, and I'm so excited for it. This could be that seeping in, but but it's kind of like chess where there's a lot of opening theory that happens, and what makes the good players from the great players is what you do in the middle and end game. And we do have lists of all these patterns, like all of the top runners of this game that I'm aware of at least got, you know, these patterns and like with the bombs. And I think even when Cypher was running it before, he initially, before we found out about the bomb RNG, actually gave us some patterns and was like, hey, when I was playing through expert mode, these are the patterns I was looking at, so maybe you want to find some good starting things. And it was almost like we had our own opening book. And just like this opening book for Woods players, and then, you know, like the middle and middle game book was when Drudbot came along and showed us all about these beautiful lists that you're seeing right now. And do we have an end game book metaphor as of this recording? No, but could we? Yeah, of course we could. I got so excited by my chess analogy that I didn't even realize we were in the castle section of the game. So the reason we call this the castle section is A, because it's the last 4 bosses of the game, so we're about 10 minutes to the end now. B, it has a lovely picture of Wario in the background in stained glass in all its glory. And particularly for expert mode, the castle section of the game is where things get really difficult. as I mentioned earlier, the castle section, the last 4 bosses, our stack starts really high and their stack starts really low. And so the primary way you want to go about this particular part of the game is it's a little bit of a mind shift. It's kind of like a Pokemon Puzzle League thing, where after a certain point you want to start thinking of the game differently. So initially, in the earlier rounds, at least the way I think about it, Petey Boo and Montucky, who are the other primary runners of this category, may think about it differently. But the way I think about it is I want to accomplish a 5 clear to get a diamond, and I want to clear that diamond as soon as I possibly can. So in this particular pattern, I see the yellow and the cyan. I know I need to wait for a red bomb 5th, and now I want to do what I can to not only clear this cyan diamond out, but I also want to make sure that I am clearing the entire color of the cyan out at the same time, if at all possible. So here I get into this spot where I want to clear the color out, realize I can't, because I just need more room, basically. The main issue with any kind of chain strategy and any kind of diamond strategy at this part of the game is that you are giving your opponent ammunition to go against you. And that can be really scary sometimes. Like, even there, like, when I'm that low, all I'm thinking of is I need a diagonal, because in addition to a 4 clear, a diagonal will actually also bring your thwomp up 1. I forgot to mention that earlier. So, there's so much to think about, and that's why I love this game so much, and that's why I want to share it with the world at AGDQ, because this game is just so amazing.
Hello.
And then things like this happen, and this is why we've talked earlier about color optimization, because at that point, when all there is are white monsters, then clear the white bomb will drop, the white monsters will drop, everything will be kosher there. There's not a whole lot left I want to talk about, except just bringing up that Harry and Wario have their own set of 16 patterns, and as much as I've shown you the bomb RNG through this run, the end game perhaps from my chess analogy would be pattern manipulation, and as of right now there's no real good way to do that, because when we asked Drudbot about it, he said that it had to do with the frame that you pressed the button to get into the round. I'm still kind of convinced that it is tied to the seed, because there are patterns that I see consistently in this seed that I didn't see before I screwed it up with prior seeds. Montucky, or Monty, likes to mix around what he plays on, but I like to keep one seed and kind of stick to it and play with it. So, as of right now, at least of this recording, pattern manipulation isn't a thing, but if it could be a thing, that would probably be the next step to Wario's Woods speedrunning, at least for expert mode, and I'm sure it would help with normal mode as well. But that's really the last thing I wanted to address. I'll keep up the lists and bring them down like I've been doing, and I'll let you enjoy the last 5 minutes or so of the run. And thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the run, a very difficult part of the game.
Breakfast. Cool. Cool. Sweet. Cool. Sweet. Yes. Cool. Sweet. Cool.
Hello.
Sweet.
Whoa!